Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey, good people, welcome. I am your host, Andrea Dragonfly, and this is the show Connected, where everything that's happening is deeply connected to your experience to life. So, we have been talking about the season. We just had the celebrations of death last week, where we had Halloween, All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, Day of the Dead. And so we were looking at the process of composting. And I think that there, of course, is the perfect kind of segue into the US presidential election and what's to come. Because even at the very beginning, like the first show back in March, I talked about how there's no coincidences that this information is coming out at this time. And then for the first several shows, I talked about energy and how energy lives in us and how that energy will become activated based on our wounds, our traumas, and different areas of our lives, because that activation is usually feeling an element of disempowerment or something in which we then kind of get, triggered around. And then, of course, several of those shows talk about how to work with that, right? And so as we look at the past and we bring it to the forward, and we're looking at this time of composting and been talking about the cycles of the season. And I've broken that down in many ways between like a year's season and what we're doing in our year, a lifetime reincarnation, looking at multiple life theory and how, there's more than one lifetime when we look at it from this perspective. We're really looking at that composting again, because it's about what is it that needs to die within us, those fears, those things that we've attached to that no longer serve us, that we are like, okay, I'm done. I've learned the lesson, or I'm learning the lesson. I want to learn the lesson from this. I want to put this to rest. I want to, lay it in the grave and rest in peace, right? So that I can move on in my own personal evolution. And so as we're moving into what's to come, this again is so essential. It's just such a powerful way of looking at our life process, because what's about to come is going to be challenging. And within that, I have to say that yesterday for myself, there was this day of grieving. And the grieving of the possibility that we could evolve without having to go through what's to come. And I knew what's to come because I educate myself. I look, and I'm not looking at, the fake media. I'm looking at, legitimate, sites that are talking about the laws, talking about Trump's criminal record, looking at all of the people that were in Trump's first administration and how many of them were indicted and had been criminally charged and are in jail or coming out of jail or whatever, and looking at the whole process, right? Because we literally elected a criminal into the highest office, not only of the United States, but of the world, because we are still, that super nation that actually is the leader on a global level. So what we do here absolutely reverberates throughout the world. So when we look at this, And so, which I'm going to present this evening, and when I was looking at this yesterday, I was grieving at the fact that I thought humanity was a little bit more conscious than they are. And remember, consciousness in the simplest form, because there's so many different ways we can define consciousness, is just what are we aware of and connected to? Because, I mean, exactly, like, if I were a constitutional lawyer, I would know so much more than what I know, which I actually look at those. I look at this website by Glenn Kirshner, which is on the YouTube, and I follow him because justice matters, and he's looking at the justice process and about how we as a nation live under this Constitution that provides us with our rights. And when the Constitution is definitely violated or broken in certain levels, then we have certain consequences to pay. And so looking at this, and then looking at the last few episodes even of the show, I've been talking about dark and dense forces. I've been talking about the demons, right? And how there's the lesser demon, which the lesser demon will come in on a one-on-one type of situation. And they want to suck the life force out of another person. And again, it's about power, control, and manipulation. This is those dense energies. This is what they thrive on. And I talked about mid-sized demons and how mid-sized demons work on groups. We talked about the cartel. We talked about, mafia. We looked at even church congregations. And there were other areas within that as well. And then we looked at the greater demons. And the greater demons really work with the institutions. And if we look at what has been happening, and I've been watching this all along, and I also know to keep my mouth shut. Everybody has the free will, freedom, and choice to make their choices. I bring information in. This is what this show is all about. I bring the information in. You get to be with it, sit with it, let it settle in you, see if it resonates, if it doesn't resonate, and take what feels right for you. Because we're all on this evolutionary journey and everybody's going to be in a different place. So for me, I'm not going to push my viewpoint on you. I'm going to introduce the things that have come into my life over the many years, and then I'm going to let you decide on how that works for you. However, when we look at the greater demons and how they really are deeply kind of settled into institutionality, and if we look at institutions, I talked about religion. I even talked about the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. I talked about how these are huge institutions that govern the world in certain ways, right? So looking at these institutions and looking at how demonic energy is a chaotic energy. And one of the things I don't think I actually defined in the previous episode was like a demon works on chaos, where the devil is organized. It's organized, sinister action. And demons create the chaos and they create the fear. And fear is the number one tool to overcome, to overpower, to manipulate, and control the will of others. We can see this throughout history. We can see that fear is the foundation element that actually will make the most sane person insane. That'll make the most sane person do something that they will absolutely would never do according to their own free will and choice. And so even like if we look throughout history, World War II, the Holocaust, everything, that the way that this dark energy works upon people is to instill fear. So when we look at this and we look at how, the Trump administration swept the nation. It's really deeply rooted in that fear. And if we look back at any, and I don't know what you've been exposed to, but if you look at any of the different kinds of like propaganda that's out there, if you're looking at the different kind of like presidential campaignings and things like that, what I know is that Donald Trump used the immigration situation to instill fear amongst Americans and about how, you know, I mean, it's so ridiculous. Like even the eating of the cats and dogs, right? Like I'm sorry I even brought that up. I was hoping that maybe that didn't come out of my mouth, but it did. And about really like looking at the fact that yes, there is an immigration problem by all means. And even on the other side, the Democratic side, they recognize that. And even Kamala and Biden wanted to put something into place at the very beginning of their administration 3.5 years ago, but it was, knocked down by the Republican Party. And right now, what we're looking at is the division of politics, the division of actually wanting to do good for the people, and or this oppositional energy that says no matter what you come up with, we're going to knock it out. We're going, and then there's these filibusters. And, if I'm speaking a language that you're not familiar with, I invite you to educate yourself on that because I don't have all of it. I'm not a politician. However, I know it's important for me to follow these things because it really does affect all of us as a nation. And I'm speaking specifically to our American people because I know that there are people from other countries, including my dear people in Mexico and whatnot, that, that this is what we're dealing with. This is how our politics are in the United States. And again, we stand for democracy. Democracy is the ability for us to have a say, the people being able to say, these are the things that aren't working for us. However, when we look to see what's to come in the Trump campaign, we're going to look at how even within that idea of democracy, that there is a very high chance that the democracy that we currently know is no longer going to be what it is or has been. And so what this leads us to is that there is a divine, I called it powers, that are at play here. And there's no coincidence. Like I said at the very beginning, there's no coincidence that this is coming to you at this time. There's no coincidence that actually Trump swept the nation. And again, it talks about the level of consciousness of the nation. What I found to be actually quite interesting, fascinating even, is that there were many people that didn't even know who was on the ticket, who was running for president. They thought it was still Biden and Trump. And so as I'm kind of watching like the post-election information and stuff like that, one of the things that was most Googled was, did Biden drop out of the presidential race? So it's like we recognize that people have just pushed off politics. They pushed off this, which I believe, and you all get to have your own opinions on this, but a very important process of what it means to be American, because not all countries allow their citizens to have a voice. And so many people believe that their voice doesn't matter. And again, there's the power of one and there's the power of many. And so when we actually connect into the collective, find your people. Find what it is that's most meaningful for you and become vocal about that, right? This is where we bring the voice forward. And most people are just like, I just want to wash my hands. I want to go to work. I want to come home. I want to eat my dinner. I want to watch my television or whatever, go to my sport, whatever it is. And then they just want to kind of like relax and not think about these things. They're very much into what I call the me consciousness versus the we consciousness. So it's that we consciousness that makes a difference. The me consciousness makes a difference too. The me consciousness brings us into the fact that, hey, there's something that I want or need or see that could be better for my life. Who else is out there that wants that too? We connect into those groups. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to dive deep into this process and about how these forces are at play, how fear has played a very central role, and how our nation's people, we the people, have become complacent and become, in many ways, just very disconnected to the process. So I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
All right, welcome back. Okay, so we're looking at the election. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are very disheartened, and even especially the women, because the women really are targeted in this election. It's almost like as if there's like a war on women when it comes to this abortion ruling. Now, I want to just let you all know it's not just about abortion. It's about reproductive health, because even within that, women who want their baby and are having a miscarriage, or women that are having twins and one of them has died in the womb, they are denied health care. And they are then being sent home or sent to go out into the parking lot and experience this whole process in a very uncomfortable situation, in a scenario. Like, who wants to bleed out almost to death in one's car before the doctors say, okay, you're sick enough for me to help you? Because it's not just about the women. And there are certain states, they said, bring it, get it out of the federal, when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court this past summer, bring it back to the states. And then there's also these politicians in the states that are very, I'm going to call them Christian nationalists. And I'm going to break that down for those that are not familiar with that word, right? But then even there, they had created these very extreme rules, and that even the healthcare providers, the doctors, the nurses, the gynecologists, all of those who are connected into the birthing process would be the target. They would be the ones to go to jail. They would be imprisoned for actually doing their job, which is to help people, because it would be under this idea, this umbrella concept, which is called the personhood law or right. I'd have to look that up. But the personhood law or right is that as soon as an egg is conceptualized with the sperm and now there's cell division happening, that now is a person. And that in many states, that person, even though it's just division of cells, embryonic cells, which then comes into fetal cell, fetal development, within that phase, they have more rights. That egg has more rights than the woman growing the egg. And so there's something that's really, really, I'm going to say, wrong with that. And that's a judgment. And I recognize that's a judgment. And then within the judgments, and we talked about judgments, right, wrong, good, or bad. But when a woman who has a life and is fully living her life, this is like a war on women, that she doesn't have the choice over her body. And again, I want to go back to the fact that with these dark, dense energies, again, it comes back to power, control, manipulation, instilling fear into people to overcome them, overpower them, right? So it really completely revokes our free will. And all of this is a spiritual process. Even a woman who gets pregnant, she has to look at her own process around that. Whether it's, okay, even if it's incest, unconsented rape, right? That these women are being forced to carry these babies to term. And some of these people are children. Girls are getting their period at 10, 11, 12 years old. They are at the effect of people that are bigger, more powerful than them. Greed. We talked about the 7 deadly sins, or the 7 sins, when we talked about the dark forces, right? And so looking at that, this is other people taking away the free will and rights of others to inflict their desire upon them of what they want for themselves, which then is connected to that dark force, power, control, manipulation. There's a connection there. They're aligning with that energy, thinking that and it's a Luciferic energy. And if you remember in one of my episodes, I think it was like 12 and 13, I talked about the Ahrimanic energy of judgment, and then the Luciferic energy of temptation. They're tempted for the me. I want for myself, and I don't care who I wreck in the process, right? So again, and I'm only looking at that. And then even in statistics, and I pulled up some statistics, and let me see if I can see the source in which I got this statistic from. But every 68 seconds in the United States, a person, so it can also be a man too, but a person is sexually assaulted. Most rapes go stated. Many people keep that to themselves even. So excuse me, I'm going to put my glasses on for a second because I can't see. So this is through RAINN, RAINN, which is the National Sexual Assault Hotline. I don't know, I know it's an acronym for something, but unfortunately I'm not able to get the full what it all stands for. So probably should have wrote that down, but I didn't. But nonetheless, that's still an issue. 68 seconds, somebody's sexually assaulted, right? And most of that is going to be the women and the girls between the ages of 12 and 44. And this is really what that is looking at. So in a certain way, this is a war on women. Now, there's so much to talk about. So I'm going to move on from this point, because when we look at what is really unfolding, we're looking at the fact that we had a female qualified woman as the Democratic presidential lead. And she was a prosecutor. Now, many people say, oh, I looked at her history, and they have all sorts of things to say as to why they didn't like her. We don't know who she is. She hasn't shown up enough, and we don't know what her policies are like. Well, she was actually quite articulate in being able to give much of her policy and what she would do for the people about actually unifying, actually bringing the other side in. She was really stating that she was going to be for all the people, whether you voted for her or not. She was inviting you to sit at the table, to bring your grievances, bring your hardships, bring your troubles, to let's look at how we can actually do something. So one of the things, and now I sit independent, and because as a spiritual healer and leader that I am, I work with all people from all sides. And I recognize that I can't have my certain opinions, but I can look at the energy, which is what I'm doing, right? We're looking at the energy. And so by looking at the energies, we are looking at how is the approach? What is the approach? How do we want to bridge and bring it together? And what we hear on the other side, within the Republican candidate, Trump, what we hear is fear mongering is the word that wants to come out of my mouth. This fear mongering. He wants to just bring fear up. And he really ran on that whole immigration piece. And not that it's not an issue. And I talked about how Biden Harris wanted to bring that in at the beginning of their campaign 3.5 years ago. But then they even had a bipartisan actual law that they were going to put into place that was going to do a ton of good. And Trump said, kill the bill before they could pass it, because he wanted to run on the problem, not solve the problem. And that's one of the big issues that was really prevalent within the campaign. And he used that to go crazy with it, right? And if you recognize, he didn't talk anything about policy. He talked very little about tariffs. And even with that tariffs, all of the different, like the highest economists of our nation, maybe even the world, I don't know, but they looked at it and they said, yeah, you know what, this is going to actually be worse for the American people, because it's going to actually add $6,000 to our already, debt that we're in with inflation, and maybe I'm not articulating that correctly, but it's going to add $6,000 on top of what we already pay in the current, economy for everyday things. And, and again, those tariffs, those countries aren't paying for those tariffs. The companies that are importing those goods are putting it back on us. We are paying for that. And so if people don't understand these things, then this is that level of consciousness that I'm talking about. If you're not conscious, then I'm going to say ignorance is bliss. And I think that this is a huge part of how Trump swept the nation. He is, oh my God, I think that he's got he does. He has 91 criminal offenses. He was already indicted on one of them, which was that whole hush money thing that was going to, he still has, some service he has to do around that. There was a potentiality of prison time or probably a large sum to pay. But as soon as he becomes president, he gets to null all of his charges. Now, he was also indicted for the federal election interference. He created an insurrection because he didn't like the results of the campaign, of the voter outcome. And because he didn't like the results, he made up a story. And he knew, and all of this is in the news. And of course, you're like, there's many people are about fake news. It's like, find the right source. Find the source that actually is going to give you the accurate information. because it's not on X. It's not on Fox News. I mean, not that MSNBC or any of those ones are the best place either. I mean, there are biases there, but there is still real journalism out there. There's still facts that people are following, right? And so with that, he also ignored the peaceful transfer of power by doing such a thing. And people got hurt. People died. And many of those people are now, the insurrectionists have been imprisoned, and now he's going to let many of them out. So it's just like, he staged a coup, is really what that is. And so we look at those energies, and this is what this is about. It's like we're putting a criminal, we're putting a person who is a liar. He is a convicted rapist. He has a long history of female misogyny. He is a hater against anybody who's different. He has no compassion for the LGBT community, for those who are experiencing transgender identity issues. And it's not about sex changes and all that. Yes, there's a part of that, but it's a small piece to the bigger picture. Right? Because even if you were born in a body that you couldn't identify with the sex that you were born with, that's a spiritual situation. We haven't talked about that yet, but that will be a future conversation. But think about, this is mass identity, disorder. I'm using that word kind of like lightly. So that, it's mass identity struggle is huge for somebody. And I worked with the LGBT community for like 15 years. So I understand what it's like to be at the effect of something that you don't have control. And again, it comes back to control, free will, control over oneself, right? Control, freedom, choice for oneself, empowerment, not disempowerment, and, also the fact that Donald Trump was Jeffrey Epstein's best guy. They were deeply connected for at least a solid decade. And so you can hear all about this in the Michael Wolff's podcast. I think it's called Fire and Fury. I have a lot of this stuff at the it's on my website. It's in the resources. It's under this episode 36. And you can listen to the podcast about Jeffrey Epstein's talking directly to Michael Wolff about his long-term relationship with Donald Trump. Of course, this is before Jeffrey Epstein was indicted and then went to prison and then committed suicide. So all of that is there in live interview. Donald Trump also had the classified documents case where he willfully retained the national defense information. This is stuff about our nuclear program and stuff. And he put all that into Mar-a-Lago. And he was in connection and had 7 phone calls after his presidency with Vladimir Putin. And of course, you can't prove this, but there's the conversation that he was looking to sell that information to the highest bidder. Why else would he take that? So if we look at the energy, we put a man into office that's bringing chaos. And this is, again, what I'm talking about. That dark, dense energy is chaos. It's infiltrated through the institutions. Now, here's the thing also. We're looking at the Project 2025. And many people are like, oh, that's bullshit. It's not going to happen. He's not going to do it. And here's the thing. 22 of 36 of his administrators from the 2016 administration, they wrote it for a very conservative president, and they put Donald Trump's name in there, I believe, over 300 times because they really wanted Trump to get in. And now when we look at these dark energies, there's many ways, there's streams of energy. How does this dense energy stream through institutions, stream through money? Trump is a man for billionaires. He's not a man for the middle person, the middle economy. And do you know, even right now, that middle class, to be a middle class person, the annual income is $350,000 plus. Well, I'm going to just say that I dropped down and now I'm in poverty level with my services because my services are about, unfortunately, truth and healing and empowerment, which don't apparently, the value in that is not nearly like what these billionaires are doing to the climate, to extracting resources out of the earth exponentially at the rate in which the earth can actually rebalance itself from. We're so out of balance, which is why we have climate crisis. And Trump has no acknowledgement that that even exists because he's for the billionaires. So the climate is going to get worse because he's letting them do whatever they want to do. Drill, baby, drill, right? And so we don't have these safeguard protections for our planet anymore. So anyway, Trump was also guilty on 34 felony accounts. And he's been a failed businessman. People say, oh, we want him because he's a businessman. This is all, it's a facade, And even if you look at his Apprentice show that he ran, the producer of The Apprentice said he was playing a part. He wasn't a true, real, genuine businessman because even for a decade, I think more than that, 15 years, from 1985 through 1994, Trump's core businesses accumulated more than $1 billion of debt and bankruptcy. He had to go bankrupt. He doesn't know how to run his own businesses, multiple casinos, all sorts of things have come up under his name, Trump University for certain things. I mean, look at how he's trying to sell everybody merchandise, right? Like, who does that? Like, that's just, it's crazy. So, but we're looking at this, I want to call it like this really deceptive energy. He's a chronic liar. Everything that came out of his mouth was more or less a lie. And he's a cheater. Looking at the last 2020 election, there's so much evidence. So, but the American people, again, I'm coming back to this. The American people have become numb to this, right? And so this is really interesting because in that numbness, I mean, even so, he's a fan of the dictators. We're looking at this fascist person coming in to actually take away our rights. Now, I also put a whole thing about Project 2025 in the resources in my website. I put in the Bill of Rights and all of the amendments. There's 27 of them. I didn't even know that, but I was like, oh, okay. And you can begin to look as to how all of these are going to be tested. And so, yeah, I just said a whole bunch of things about the dark energy of the Trump campaign and the administration. And this is what we're going to get. This is what's coming to us. So I'm going to take a quick break so I can grab a glass of water. But when we get back here, we're going to take a really hard look at how actually this is the divine powers are at play. What is to come from this? Because we're going to get really uncomfortable for a period of time. All right, I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio radio show host and coach, John M. Hawkins, reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Okay, welcome back. Okay, now clearly most people knew all of that, right? So I am reiterating a lot of what was already known. So this last part of the show, I'm gonna talk about why this is important and why actually Trump was the chosen one. So now again, Kamala Harris's campaign wasn't all, 100% everything either, right? I mean, we have a very divided nation, and the politics have gotten to the point where really nothing can get done. And so, in a certain way, the politics need a drastic change. And so many people that I am connected to, so many people who, especially within the spiritual communities that I'm connected to, they see both parties are deeply infested with this dark energy, this greater demonic energies on both sides. And of course there's conspiracy theories about Democrats eating babies and all sorts of things, right? Like whatever, all of those things, which are connected to those demonic forces, right? So getting back to the whole point about how there's no coincidences. From the very beginning of March, humanity's changing. We are moving into a new world, even though it may look ordinarily the same, right? But we are moving into a new world. Our consciousness is rising, and it has been rising since 2008 and 2012 and all sorts of kind of monumental moments throughout our recent past. But what we're having happen actually on November, I think it's 17th, and I probably should have wrote this down, is that Pluto is about to move into Aquarius and stay there for the next 20 years. Now, you know that I talk about astrology, and you know that I'm not an astrologer, and however, I do follow it. And I always encourage you to go online, find your astrology people so that you can understand how impactful this is. Because also, it's not just Pluto moving into Aquarius, but 5 other planets are changing into new houses. And so Aquarius is a house. So Saturn's moving into a new house. And unfortunately, I don't have all of that information in front of me, but we're going to have huge change in a way that we're going to feel it. Now, here's the thing. Project 2025 is going to happen. And we're going to lose a lot of what we know to be our normal life experience. They're going to get rid of the Department of Justice, which is the checks and balances, even with the president. We're going to get rid of the Department of Education, which, if you know anybody in the teaching industry, that's not going to be very good for them or our children, right? So, and these are just one of the thematic things that have come out over, the campaign. But there's also the Heritage Foundation, which is ultra Christian. And it's also very connected into what I call the Christian nationalists, which are also kind of the very right wing evangelicals. And they believe that this nation needs to be a under God nation. We need to bring their version of Christianity into the greater human United States collective. And they're talking about bringing their version of religion and their prayers into the public schools. And now all of this is within our amendment rights, our First Amendment even. And so it's like, no, we have the freedom of, believing our own path, and if we don't believe that path, we get to believe what we want to believe, right? So that Christian nationalism is also going to be a huge part of what's coming our way. Now, we can look at this, and because I had mentioned just before commercial that Trump is a big fan of the dictators, of Putin, of Kim Jong-un, of Xi Jinping from China, Kim Jong-un's from North Korea, if you didn't know that already. And then his model leader, when he was asked like who he admired, he said the Hungarian dictator, Viktor Orban. So he is in perfect step, perfect alignment, that he is going to do his very best to bring in what will become a loose and maybe into a more structured autocracy, which is different than a democracy. And he's going to get rid of all of the life kind of like government people. So I think they're like known as lifers, or they're known as something, but people who have dedicated and have lived, have worked in the government in these different offices and whatnot, regardless of who the president is. So they are bipartisan, meaning like whatever, president comes in, they're well trained, they know their job, they know how to do their job, all the things. He's going to get rid of all of them, and he's going to replace them with Trump loyalists. So we're moving into, whether you like it or not, this is what most people, I don't think, realize, and most people are like, no, that's not true. We're moving into what is going to become an incredibly oppressive to our free will, choice, and freedom. We're moving into another version of a revolution, is what is happening. Because it's extreme. This is called extremism, radical extremism. And because Trump thinks that we're complacent, and because we don't have a lot of power as just the people who are not the billionaires behind it all, we are going to actually kind of like cattle be herded into this new government. Now, this is where Pluto comes into Aquarius. Pluto is the planet, and some people say, Mom, that was my daughter earlier today. She's like, Mom, Pluto's not a planet. So Pluto, or whatever you want to call it, planet or dwarf star or whatever, is moving into Aquarius. And Pluto is that of destruction and rebirth. So 48 years ago, the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, July 4th. And it takes Pluto 248 years to make a full revolution around the sun, where the Earth takes, a year, right? So we have Pluto taking 248 years around the sun. And in that, we are going to have what's called a recapitulation. Now, I know that sometimes my vocabulary is out there, but a recapitulation is we're going to have another go around. It's a summarized version of what already happened. And so in 1776, we were in our Revolutionary War. We were fighting the monarch of England. We were being heavily taxed. The people were, having to give their taxes across overseas to the king. We had a lot of oppression placed on the people. This is where these amendments came from. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to carry arms, freedom for, and we go down the amendments and we can see exactly how the amendments are aligned. And those amendments were what those people were going through that said, we need to put these into law. This is going to be the law of the new country. Well, the new country is now 248 years old. And we are going through a second version. It's a different version. It's a modified version, but it's about waking up the people, because Trump's administration is going to screw us in ways. And the whole thing is a spiritual process of waking up. And when Pluto goes into Aquarius, the waking up process, the awakening, the spiritual awakening, is going to happen on an exponential level. It's going to happen rapidly. And so we can even look within the 4 years of the Trump administration and how much it's going to affect us. It's not going to feel good. And that's why at the very beginning, the first 12 shows, it was all about how does energy work within our bodies, to how do we feel about certain things that are coming at us, right? How do we cope? How do we deal with that? So if you need a recap or a refresher, go back to those first several episodes about how we are, we have those 7 levels of energy, and how do we use those energies to the best of our ability for coping, dealing, overcoming, staying optimistic, right? So this is that part of us that is having to evolve. These spiritual powers are putting Trump in place to evolve not just the American people, but because of the trickle-down effect, or because of whatever, all of humanity. Of course, the United States is having their 248th birthday, where Pluto is coming exactly to the point where it was during the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And so we need to look at the fact that there is no coincidence, and that we're going to be incredibly challenged by what's to come. And within that challenge, it's going to grow us, and it's going to grow us in the recognition that the old system is breaking apart and is falling away. And that's what Pluto also does. Saturn is the planet of structure and of kind of like top down and very controlled in environments and whatnot. Like, it's a very controlled structural type of energy. And so Saturn's moving into a new house as well. And I'm so sorry that I don't have which house that is, but the structures are going to fall. We're not going to have the same life and world we've always known for the last 100, 200 years. It's going to change drastically, and we're a part of it. We all came into this life at this time to actually witness and be a part of this human change, this change of humanity. And so it's a very exciting time. But here's the thing: knowledge is power. When we know these things, we will persevere. We'll get through this. When we know what's to come down the pike, we can prepare ourselves on an energetic level that says, hey, yeah, you know what? I know this is coming. How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to, like, maybe, when food's on sale, stock up? When, this is also going to affect, our monies in the future. Now, there is an awesome video that I posted in my resources, and it's about it's the 5 stages of Pluto, and it is awesome. So I highly encourage all of you who are watching and will watch to check that out, because the maker of that video did an excellent job of looking at what was happening during the 20-year span of Pluto during 1776, and what can we expect for ourselves in this next 20 years? How are we going to have to die? And that, remember, I talked about compost last week, and we have to compost and learn the lessons of what didn't work for us, so we can birth into something new, birth into something that actually will evolve us, bring us into a higher state of awareness, expand our consciousness. And this is where we're going. So this is why it's really important for all of us. And again, I was just talking to my guy, my engineer during the break, about how this is the time for us to recognize that there is a calling. We're being called to step up, and we're being called to step up and actually get out of the fog and take the blinders off, or like remove the wool from over our eyes and look to see what's going to happen. This is a time for us to unify. This is a time for power back to the people. And the way that the power comes back to the people is where the people unify and say, yeah, you know what? This isn't working for us. Nope. Mm-mm. And we're moving forward in a new way. And so within that, this is that time for us to know what's to come. How do we prepare ourselves? And also start getting involved with alliances, getting along with community, and of course, many of those people who are already watching the show already have some sort of connection to some of that, right? But it's those who would never watch the show that are, we encourage. One of the things that I learned last year, which was beautiful because I spent a life studying with wisdom teachers and medicine men and women from, all over the Americas and Europe and whatnot. And so, with the Hawaiian people, I was looking at, hey, I'm in Hawaii for a few months. I'd like to connect with some of the elders. And my friend, my middleman friend, my dear sweet sister, she said, what the elders would say to you is, take what you know back to your family. Bring it to your family. Begin to heal your family. Begin to, unify the family instead of saying, oh, you and my politics don't work and I'm never going to speak to you again, right? And I even have people in my family, close relatives in my family, that voted for Trump because they're oblivious about what's about to happen. And I have to sit with my unconditional love, my compassion, and my forgiveness, right? So this is where we bring that out. The unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness for ourselves, when we've done, things that we could possibly feel remorse over, for our loved ones, our family, our community, our nation, and the world, right? That higher compassion, because that is what heals, that is what elevates, that is what expands in a whole new way and helps bring us into the next level of our humanity. Now, I want to just thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I know that I said a whole bunch of stuff about what's to happen, and I just want to say, please take what feels right and discard what doesn't. If you think that what I've said to you tonight is something that is creating some sort of uncomfortability in you, just sit with that. Allow that to inform you, but know that we are the change. We are the change that is about to happen. And so I just want to thank everybody. That you can always connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly. Reach out to me through my website at the contact me at andreadragonfly.com. So as always, stay connected to yourself, connect to your truth, and connect to the greater truth that is out there wanting us to know it. So with all of that, take care, and I hope to see you next week.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.